All right, good morning or afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to attend this webinar, which is put on by the Streaming Video Alliance. It is called End-to-End Monitoring Best Practices, and we have a great lineup of speakers to talk about really figuring out how to monitor all of those components in a streaming video workflow. Obviously to make sure that we can capture all the data we need to, and we can identify the problems before they happen, and we can take action to improve the viewer experience. Now, if you're not familiar with the Streaming Video Alliance, I'm Jason Thibeault. I'm the executive director. We are a global trade association similar to SMPTE and IETF that brings folks together to solve critical challenges in the streaming video space. And our website is at the bottom of the slide, so if you're interested, just take a look there. Today, we're going to start off with introductions, so we'll move through our participants. And once we do that, we've got some really cool questions to get the discussion started. Just to let you know, and as a reminder, you can pose questions yourself as well. So if anytime during the discussion you want to raise your hand in the questions panel, simply type in your question and I will try to get that answered by the appropriate person or the entire panel. If we get to the end of the webinar and we haven't addressed your question, we will try to address it via email afterwards. All right, with that said, let's start with our introduction. So our first panelist is Chris Kulbakas from SSIMWAVE. Chris.
Thank you, JT. My name is Chris Kulbakas. I work as a product strategy director at SSIMWAVE. Here at SSIMWAVE, we care about the end viewer and how they experience video quality. We developed the algorithm trusted by Hollywood, the SIMPLUS perceptual viewer score, to help broadcasters and streaming services understand what their subscribers are experiencing and to help those companies balance feasibility with the best experience possible. We also want to help the industry preserve artistic intent and especially HDR quality, which is the future, and we have special project with the American Society of Cinematographers on that as well.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. And next is Dan Murray from Telestream.
Hi, I'm Dan Murray, and I lead the marketing of the monitoring solutions for Telestream, and that includes the IQ monitoring solutions. And we provide solutions for operators, broadcasters, cloud providers, so that they can ensure their programs and quality of service are operating end to end.
Awesome, and last but not least, we have Brenton Ough from Touchstream.
Yeah, thanks, JT. Hi, I'm Brenton Ough from Touchstream. I'm the CEO. We're a sort of startup, I suppose. And we focus on OTT live stream monitoring. And basically, we have an end-to-end monitoring capability that combines a lot of our own technologies and integrations with other third parties. So if you've got another third party doing a specific bit of monitoring, we can integrate that into our end-to-end views. So we're 100% focused on OTT monitoring, because we're new.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so let's start out with something a little high level, which is to make sure we're all speaking, from the same dictionary. What really does end-to-end monitoring mean? I mean, what's being monitored? Are there things that can't be monitored? Are the right things even being monitored? For example, does rebuffer ratio, does that even matter? Obviously, that's a pretty loaded question, but, hey, Brenton, maybe you can kind of start us off with that, and then everyone else can chime in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and we're thinking specifically of OTT streaming here, being the Streaming Video Alliance. But end-to-end monitoring means monitoring everything from effectively from the camera if possible, but from the signal acquisition. I mean, wherever you're getting the video signal from, through all of its stages, and typically in live streaming, that's going to be encode, package, possibly DRM, origin, CDN, and then out to the final player. And so all of those steps in that long end-to-end chain that is, for live streaming particularly, is just happening every second of every day or the event. All of that should be monitored if at all possible, and potentially in between. So where you hand off from, say, the encoder to the packager, there's an opportunity to monitor there. And so basically all of this is important in end-to-end monitoring, and the key reason for that is to get to the root cause of a problem as quickly as possible and start to see things as going wrong hopefully before they impact the end viewer. So that's my kind of quick top-level view of end-to-end monitoring.
Sure. And then Dan or Chris, what do you guys think? I mean, you obviously come from a different perspective. You have different technologies. What do you feel is end-to-end monitoring? What does that really mean?
Yeah, this is Dan with Telestream, and clearly live video workflows are not only complex, but there's handoff between folks. So you'd have a broadcaster, a content creator that's going to hand off to an operator, and they may hand off to different parts of workflow, to streaming operators, to CDNs, and that kind of thing. And so being able to monitor all the way from ingest, anytime content is modified, any handoffs, and making sure that things are operating along the way is very important, in being able to know that things are not only operating correctly, but having the data and any correlation along the way for troubleshooting and be proactive in case something goes wrong.
Sure. Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to those points, we look at end-to-end as a guiding principle, focusing on starting with the end viewer in mind. And then once you start with the end viewer in mind, you then work backwards upstream throughout the workflow to ensure that each part of the workflow is doing what it's supposed to be doing to keep the subscribers happy and keeping the quality of experience high. Not only that, this is also about consistency of quality, keeping consistent end viewer quality across the workflow throughout the streaming experience, and detecting when this is not the case. So, for example, detecting bad perceptual quality at device playout, detecting streaming issues across the entire player population, detecting quality degradations across your encodes and your transcodes, and not letting bad video quality enter your workflow.
No, I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. And actually, that brings up a really interesting second question, which honestly might be a little heretical. But does monitoring different parts of the workflow even matter if they don't directly impact the quality of experience? I mean, obviously, Chris, your company really deals with, one of the things they deal with that they're known for is understanding visual perceptive quality. So, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, does it matter to measure, CDN latency if it doesn't impact the quality of experience?
Absolutely, JT. Quality of service, quality of delivery. There is an interesting interplay between those types of metrics and the resulting end viewer experience. So absolutely, the bits have to get there, right? So, delivery metrics are a starting point to see what's happening underneath, whether or not the metrics are showing actual correlation between impact to viewer experience. They can be used as a predictor, an early predictor of things going wrong on the network and packet level and system level. But ultimately, it is the end viewer experience, the perceptual quality experience that the viewers are experiencing that provides us with the final and complete picture of end viewer quality.
Okay, and then Brenton and Dan, what do you guys feel about that? I mean, did I ask a crazy question?
Not at all, and some good points there made by Chris. And I think one of the key things I'd like to pick up on is the early warning indicators. So you can start to see things going wrong before they actually do impact the quality of experience. So they're leading indicators that are telling you better pay attention here. Otherwise, you may impact the quality, and it's important to pick those things up early. The additional point I'd like to make is we do a lot of very large-scale sporting events, and the big thing in large-scale sporting events is redundancy. So there's often multiple redundant parts, obviously, so that when things go wrong, the quality of experience is not impacted. But of course, you need to monitor all of those redundant parts so that you make sure that you keep your redundancy. So if one of the parts does fail, you're actually on top of it quickly.
Yeah, this is Dan with Telestream, and just to add to that, I agree with both the points that Chris and Brenton made. I think that it's amazing, the wide range of things that can occur to a live video stream that does impact a customer. And I think you mentioned latency being one of them, for example, which could lead to rebuffering and things like that. But along the workflow, if the video is modified and the audio goes wrong, too high or too low, if there's video compression issues, if there's issues with ad inserts and things aren't being done right there, it's just amazing how many things can go wrong. And so instrumenting along the video workflow to identify and be proactive that, hey, there's something going wrong here, identify what it is, where it is, and be able to adjust it quickly, is key to be able to maintain that quality of experience for the customers.
Okay, and that actually, go ahead.
Sorry, JT. Yeah, I would also jump in. There are some other interesting metrics as well out there that, potentially do not speak to the quality of experience. One example is viewership data. So for instance, if along with all of the other quality of delivery and perceptual quality metrics that you're monitoring, you're also tracking viewership, viewership data can help you prioritize where to focus for example, your diagnostics and fix efforts when you have several different, failures occurring in your workflow and your network. So that's an example of data that is not directly related to quality of experience, but is very important as well.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously I think what you guys are uncovering or exposing is the fact that there's lots of places within and around the workflow to collect data, which can provide, either in and of themselves or together in aggregate, some view of, what's happening with the service that, a video distributor is trying to provide to their viewers. And that leads me into this next question, which is around the challenges of end-to-end monitoring. From your guys' perspective, and I'll ask sort of Dan to answer first on this, because Dan comes from Tektronix, which had a very interesting, video stream, kind of analysis tool, and that got acquired by Telestream, which already had a huge presence in, measurement and QoE and monitoring. And so, what I'd like to understand, and Dan, if you can start us out, is where are the challenges? Are they largely technical that people have to keep in mind, or are there human-related challenges as well, such as like getting the data fast enough and being able to analyze it to identify a problem?
Yeah, I think one of the things interesting is it's one thing for a product or a person to be able to say, hey, there's an issue with this program, but actually having monitoring and tools in place that can provide what I would call forensics, right? It's one thing to say, hey, a person got injured, but another thing to go back and the forensics of what actually occurred and how that happened, right? So being able to get those forensics, then being able to correlate that across that workflow and provide to the operator or the person running the program, and be able to say, here's what's going wrong, here's the impact it's having on customers, and what it is, so that they can either switch to the backup, for example, as Brendan talked about, or be able to diagnostic and resolve it as quick as possible is key. So the deep forensics, being able to correlate and being able to boil that up into actionable intelligence in information for that operator so they can take care of that quickly. And then I guess we also believe that being able to do that in cloud, being able to do that in virtual, being able to do that physically in an appliance, wherever the video is, however the customer needs to be able to do that, be able to automate that for the customer.
Brenton, do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, what do you see, with the customer implementations you guys have done? Are there, critical technical challenges that they have to overcome, or is it kind of what Dan was going to, really sort of, people or human operations level issues?
Well, yeah, that makes some great points there. It is a combination of both of those things. I mean, there is technical challenges there's a myriad of technical challenges, and some of them are right down to, well, do the people operating this actually understand all the technical implications of different things happening? You know, we all specialize in monitoring tools, and we actually really dig deep into this stuff, but sometimes the operations teams of some of the broadcasters don't quite have the same experience that we do in the depth of things. So when you actually present them with data, they may not necessarily fully understand what that data is telling them. So we just tend to embark on a lot of education programs, and where we actually educate people about what this data means, and when you see these types of things, this is how you should be reacting to them. The other thing that Dan has alluded to there is that the workflows are very different. Broadcaster to broadcaster, you know, some people use the cloud components, some people use on-premise, some people use virtualization. You know, there's a whole bunch of different things. So actually implementing these types of monitoring solutions, you know, it's not necessarily a you know, straight out of the box task. It takes some effort, and then again, as Dan mentioned, correlating all that data together to make it meaningful is another. You know, it also takes some effort. Yeah, so you know, it's all pays off in the end, but it actually requires people to make a, you know, concerted effort to pull together a program to actually address all of this and actually make sure they cover off all the technical challenges.
I agree with Chris. What about yourself? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with Brenton and Dan. I believe, you know, we're facing both technological and human based factors, you know, in terms of the challenges of end-to-end monitoring. For example, you know, technically we require, you know, for example, correlation is a big challenge. In terms of human factors, you know, process-wise, you know, how do we deal with high volumes of monitoring data? But I would say also, in addition to this, you know, and sort of the panacea or the holy grail is, you know, is it possible to use the same common metric in an end-to-end fashion across the entire workflow and across the different stages in the workflow, particularly to understand, you know, where are the perceptual quality drops occurring along that workflow? So that, you know, that is one, I think, key challenge that is still facing the industry. And beyond that, you know, there are also some organizational and silo aspects, such as, you know, ability to share data between, you know, stakeholders of the workflows, right? The sharing of data between your upstream stakeholder and your downstream stakeholder. You know, because as we know, workflows are, you know, usually not monolithic. We have multiple stakeholders in a end-to-end workflow, so ability to exchange information in a quick and efficient fashion to diagnose and fix issues. And last but not least, I would say, you know, there are also challenges in integrating monitoring platforms with the next generation OTT workflows, right? So ability to deploy lightweight probes anywhere in the workflow, including in the cloud, you know, elasticity aspects, ability to spin up, to spin down in concert with those cloud-based workflows, right? And the configuration metadata aspects that are required to configure the monitoring platforms to monitor the appropriate streams and the appropriate services in those workflows as they change and evolve over time.
I mean, and that makes a lot of sense, you know, and it's funny because, you know, that again, I love it when you guys talk about something and it just leads right into the next question. You know, one of the things that I've observed in talking to, you know, some members, you know, within the organization, it is about, you know, how they monitor. And so one of the things I hear is, you know, the difficulty in combining data from different monitoring tools, whether they're probes or hardware or, you know, something else. You know, they've got sort of like 3, 4, 5 different, you know, dashboards that they have to go look at, especially when, you know, a monitoring service, for example, might have their own dashboard and they're like, yeah, you know, we just prefer you use this. You know, we've got APIs, but, you know, it's going to be really difficult for you to, you know, to build your own dashboard. So, you know, how do companies deal with that, with this, you know, kind of like, Chris, what you were talking about a second ago, which is this, I've got all this data, it's all over the place, you know, is there a best practice or a way that you guys have seen operators sort of combining or using data into a single view? And, you know, maybe Brenton, maybe you can lead us off on this one.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, JT. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, we do that. We actually heard this a couple of years ago when we were talking to people and we started trying to, say, here, we've got this great monitoring tool that does this stuff. And the first thing that they would say is, oh, not another dashboard. We just can't fit another dashboard in here. So we actually listen to our customers and address that by creating an open end-to-end monitoring solution where you can actually integrate data from any other tool or any other scripting. A lot of people have a lot of internal scripting that we can build into our end-to-end view. So we cover this off with our end-to-end visualization, and basically we allow our customers to integrate data, and particularly the top KPIs from lots of different monitoring tools. And then that allows them to very quickly visually see where the root cause is. And then typically they would jump into the actual monitoring interface of that tool, which will have richer data than we pull out as KPIs. So you are correct. You do need one overarching, visualization, I believe, of everything, and then the ability to launch into the specific tool when you need to. And that's what we do.
All right. And then, Chris and Dan, what do you guys think about that? What has been your experience?
Yep, GT. So yeah, absolutely. Echoing Brenton's sentiments there. The challenge, the swivel chair or the silo effect challenge, right? So one of the key principles and the focus in the best practices is we focus on quote unquote the journey of the asset through the workflow end to end, right? So irrespective of the number of components being monitored in that workflow, whether it's 15 or 20 or 50 of them, you need to know each component's performance impact on the end viewer, right? And so you measure these components along your choice monitoring points along the workflow, and you feed the information into a common brain, right? A central place where you can gather key insights, and where this central decision-making system, it leads you to actionable operational, technology, and business decisions, right? So for instance, if your primary feed is impacted, can I switch to my backup feed? And what is the viewer experience for that backup feed? Or, if macro blocking is being detected at the output of the encoder, do I have the correct settings for that encoder? Am I even using the right encoder for that content type? Or, for example, if there is an ongoing outage where 10 or 50 different assets are, being reported as being down, which of those assets do we focus on first in order to diagnose and fix?
Yeah, this
Dan,
Dan with
Telestream.
I think well said. I think one of the things you mentioned is that as part of Telestream, we in the Tektronix Video joined Telestream in July, along with IQ Solutions, and we've informed our customers that all the monitoring products across Telestream, as well as the Tektronix Video, will be aggregated under the same video monitoring system, so that customers, as they look at their broadcast streams, ingest streams, package streams, and CDN monitoring streams, can bubble up and see an end-to-end view in correlation in the same monitoring system, as well as if an operator has their own third-party dashboard and stuff like that, we have northbound interfaces and can plug into those as well. So we believe that providing a correlated view and having a rich experience with a number of Telestream products all feeding into that system provides a rich experience to our operators in their diagnostics and supporting their video operations centers.
No, that's really cool, and I have heard a bit of that, right? So like the DevOps folks and the ops guys are starting to experiment with their own visualization, like with Tableau or like a Datadog, or something that aggregates a bunch of data from a bunch of different places and being able to sort of visualize that themselves. But the next question I have actually is more around action. So I'll be honest, monitoring seems great. Like, yeah, I want to know what's happening with my workflow, but being able to act against that when, for example, like a live stream, if you're seeing the problem and then you're acting on it 3 minutes later, well, obviously the problem's probably gone. or at least the viewers who are experiencing it are probably gone. And so I wonder, is there right now any sense of the use of, like AI or machine learning to do some sort of, automation against data that's being gathered from the workflow and sort of end-to-end monitoring? And maybe we can, Chris, maybe you can start us out on this one. Are you seeing any use of those technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, JT, I have sort of a two-part answer to this. There's a perceptual aspect and there's the operational aspect, right? Yes, absolutely. AI ML is great for many industries, but when it comes to perceptual quality evaluation, it's AI ML and using that for perceptual video quality prediction. It is a big challenge. It requires a lot of training data. Every time you have to change an encoder setting, you need to retrain the data set, etc. So when it comes to perceptual quality, as opposed to AI or ML, another approach is to consider the human visual system model, right? The human visual system model is unique, it's constant, the model stays constant. It's a knowledge-based system, does not use AI or ML or training. This approach is based on the understanding and modeling of the human visual system. So the end result is, for example, you have new encoder settings, you're trying different encoder settings, new transcoder settings, etc. Your model does not require retraining. You still get the perceptual quality assessment that you need. So that's on the perceptual quality assessment front. But however, on the operational front, there is definite opportunity when it comes to operational aspects. So for example, using AI ML for historical trending and analysis, prediction given current readings, historical readings, and what's happening with the workflow at the current point in time, right? Alert correlation, root cause analysis, false positive identification. I think there are a lot of areas where there is an opportunity to make headway using AI and ML techniques for operational aspects.
And Dan and Brenton, what do you guys think about those technologies and the use in monitoring?
Yeah, so my view is that the monitoring products themselves are in effect kind of like a artificial intelligence, in that instead of having people sitting in a room watching every program and every variation of that program, that's become impractical over time. And actually, monitoring systems can monitor in much more depth than a human, much faster, correlate immediately, and in effect is providing like an artificial intelligence. And then I'd say inside of that, there are certain features within the products that are, AI related, if you will. So we do support in the products picture MOS quality scores is an optional feature, for example, that can look at the pixels and see if there's compression related issues going on. There's looking across the workflow at advertising, for example, and are things working well there, or being able to look along there and make some intelligent decisions about what's going on, and things are changing. So, there may be something going wrong here. And being able to alert on these things and let operators know proactively instead of waiting until their Twitter feed blows up from customers, which, can take minutes to occur or whatever, whereas monitoring products can let them know right away.
Yeah, Brenton, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a little bit skeptical of the terms AI and ML. We kind of use those types of techniques as both Dan and Chris have said, and I agree a lot with Dan. I mean, we've built a lot of these types of things into our tools, and I sometimes think, is it really AI or ML? Well, it depends on your definition. But the way we're looking at data is very large. We have very large data sets of data, particularly CDN related data. And you can actually start to see a lot of things if you have a very large data set. You can start to see the impacts of when CDNs do certain things, or certain things happen at CDN, particularly when CDNs do tend to offload at different locations when a certain portion of the edge becomes slightly overloaded. So being able to detect those things requires a lot of effort and a lot of ML type approaches to actually detect it, and then, as Dan said, to warn you, so you know that these things are happening and this could have an impact, and you can take remedial steps to avoid it being an impact. But yes, I think I like to think it is more about analysing very large data sets and looking for anomalies and looking for changes. And that provides a huge amount of value.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You know, obviously the data lakes are growing. It's, you know, to such a point where, you know, maybe even human analysis, you know, is probably going to be more difficult because the data sets are so huge that, you know, perhaps in the future we'll see some, you know, some automated ways of, you know, of doing analysis so that, you know, so that humans don't have to do it at first and then they can dig in, you know, sort of after the fact. But we'll jump to sort of the future of monitoring in a little bit. The next question I have is, it actually goes back a little bit to a question that you guys all answered earlier around sort of, you know, KPIs and, you know, and data points and kind of, you know, are we measuring the right things and what is the level of measurement, you know, that's sort of, you know, industry acceptable. And, you know, maybe Dan, you know, you can kick us off with this one, but, you know, are there any kind of agreed upon KPIs for, you know, specific components within the workflow? Maybe it's, you know, round trip time for CDN, or maybe it's rebuffer ratio or things like that, you know, and if there aren't, you know, kind of like, should there be?
Right, so there are a number of you know, KPIs related to video workflows. I think the SVA has published, you know, player statistics that are recommended. You know, within transport streams, there's a QoS layer with the TR 101-290 statistics. Things like audio, there's COM compliance, there's closed captioning, you know, standards. And so there are a number of KPIs. I think, you know, as a monitoring vendor, we've added additional richness to, you know, the statistics and forensics that we collect and bubble up and enable our customers to select their own KPIs. So they may use a range of industry standard KPIs as well as additional KPIs that they set up for their network that we can alert them on and provide information to correlate to. We do believe that providing best practices and recommendations and you know, standardizing some of these stats would help the operators and help the industry at large, and are very supportive of that.
That's great. Chris and Brenton, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, JT. Yeah, this is a great question actually, and you know what, this is precisely why, you know, here at SSIMWAVE we've developed the SIM Plus algorithm and the viewer score metric. You know, prior to joining SSIMWAVE, I've been on the other side, right, working for one of the biggest North American operators, and this has been one of our biggest pain points is, you know, what KPIs do we use? Is there a single KPI? Are there multiple KPIs, et cetera? And, you know, we've always experienced the lack of a common viewer-centric metric, you know, to be used across the end-to-end workflow. So, you know, my view on this is that, you know, we're working as an industry towards, you know, we do have the underlying metrics, but we're also working towards the possibility of having a common metric, a common language to measure along the workflow, right? You know, whenever we talk to content owners, operators, distributors, right, broadcaster, there's still a lot of finger pointing, right, and blame going both ways. So, you know, we strongly believe that using a common score, common viewer score across the entire workflow in an end-to-end fashion across multiple monitoring points from sources through encode, transcode, all the way to the end, you know, that is one way to approach this challenge.
Okay, Brenton?
Yeah, this is Brenton. Yeah, I agree with the guys there, and yeah, I mean, we have started with the player-related metrics, and I believe that type of approach needs to be sort of gone back through the workflow, and the more standardization we get on monitoring metrics, the easier that bit is going to be for people to have standardized, or as close to standardized as you can, which allows everyone to get on with better things. Basically, you know, improve you spend more time improving your product in better ways. So getting some of the pretty much boring stuff out of the way in under standardization would be a very positive move.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, you know, from where I sit, that's exactly what we want, right? We want more, you know, consistency and agreement upon what's being measured and how it's being measured. And, obviously all three of you guys are, your SVA members. You're part of our measurement / QoE working group, and you guys are currently working on a best practices doc for end-to-end streaming. If you could, maybe Brenton, maybe you could start us off with this, but sort of what does that doc cover, and how will the industry be able to make use of it?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, all three of us are working very hard on this document and basically applying all of our experience, plus quite a few other people as well, because all of us have sort of specializations in various aspects of the workflow. So being able to bring together vendors and, of course, the content owners, so there is a couple of the big content companies that are part of this as well, is very useful. And so what we've tried to do is look at the end-to-end workflow and try to identify, what are the opportunities to monitor at each part of the workflow and in the handoffs between them. So we identify kind of like what can we monitor, how do we monitor it, and why do we monitor it here? And then, of course, what are the metrics that we can extract at these points, and what are the benefits of these metrics? So we're doing a lot of we've been doing a lot of work. It's nearing completion on the entire live end-to-end workflow, and basically it will allow people to look at these and actually look at their workflow and say, well, which of these components do I have? Because quite often people are outsourcing elements of their workflow, but it allows them to look at the elements they do have and say, well, what are the opportunities I have here? What is going to be the value of monitoring at each one of these points, and how can I put that all together?
No, great. I mean, so Chris and Dan, obviously you guys are working on the document as well, contributing, what you guys can from your experience. What do you, is there anything you want to add to what Brenton just said about the doc and how it might be applied? I'll take that as a no.
Well, actually, yeah, this Dan, I thought Chris would go first. So this Dan, Telestream is pleased to work with the SVA and the QoE group, and we think an end-to-end best practices document is an excellent idea. Traditionally you go in and you work closely with a large cable operator, and inside a traditional cable operator, they have their internal practices they've done for years, and have updated and evolved those to the latest technology. But as you look at OTT and streaming, you get cloud-based workflows and CDNs and a variety of new handoffs and new challenges with OTT, and being able to take best practices that we've learned over the years in cable operators, but then evolve them to the newer technologies and cloud services and virtualized workflows and things like that, and putting best practices together for these new operators or new workflows, and can look across these best practices, we think is an excellent idea for the customers at large.
Yeah, and I would also add, I think the paper is about proposing, the key principles to the industry around end-to-end monitoring. One of the key principles is starting with the end viewer in mind. Start with the viewer and work your way back. Start with the playout, work through the CDN, back to package transcode, encode, and source. Assess the journey of that asset through that workflow across the monitoring points. How and where to monitor using these multiple monitoring points in end-to-end fashion, what methodologies and techniques to use at those monitoring points, and how to make sense of that data, how to stitch that data together and correlate that data to give you that end-to-end view of quality.
No, that's great. I mean, I definitely am looking forward, to the doc. I think a lot of people are, we've got a lot of content owners in the SVA that are very interested and have been contributing as well. So it's, I think this is what the industry needs. It actually made me think about, I wonder if we shouldn't do, like if the organization shouldn't do another piece of content that maps all of the end-to-end monitoring points to current specs and standards that are out there, right? So, maybe it's a, you just look at all the components that you guys have identified in the doc, and we map it to sort of who has a standard for that. The last, so we're getting to the end of the webinar actually here. We may wrap up a little early, but just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to post them in the question box, and then, of course, we'll get those answered. Kind of following on a little bit to that last question, thinking about the next kind of 12 to 24 months, we've obviously seen, a ton of new OTT platforms entering the market. We've seen that live content is becoming increasingly important in terms of what viewers want to watch. And so, do you guys see, and maybe Dan, maybe you can start us with this one, what kind of technologies do you see or foresee coming over the next couple of years that may impact how video distributors are monitoring their end-to-end workflow?
I think there's 5 points that we thought would be interesting to bring up on the, if this topic were to come up in the webinar. I think, first of all, since streaming is, cloud-based, people are streaming over the internet to see live video. We think there will be an increase in cloud-related monitoring services, and Telestream, recently introduced the optic monitoring service, but that enables operators to increasingly do things on demand. So they're going to spin up a sports workflow, and they can monitor that and spin it down when they're done, and be able to do what they need, as they need it, where they need it, anywhere in the world. We also believe that with end-to-end monitoring that, it's a hybrid world. And so you increasingly have workflows that are on-prem and parts of those workflows, but not all of it, moving to cloud or virtualized workflows. So being able to have a combination of cloud monitoring and capabilities, virtual solutions, hardware or appliance solutions, and enabling customers to be able to support a hybrid world as they transition over the next 12 to 24 months, increasingly to more software and cloud workflows is important. We also believe that the broadcasters are going through an interesting transition from SDI to IP, and being able to monitor as part of end-to-end solutions and direct to consumer, all the way from IP to the end player or synthetic player is important. And then the last two I'd bring up as well is, advertising and being able to monetize OTT services, is key, of course. And being able to have that work really well and be able to monitor that monetization is important. And one of the things we've talked a lot about in the webinar here is correlation and being able to automate that. And I think within Telestream, that's an area of focus for us, and continuing to improve that and make it easier for the operator to correlate and monitor that network end to end.
Great. Chris or Brenton, any ideas on future technologies?
Well, Dan's just gone and stolen it all. Well done, Dan. Thanks. They're great points. They're exactly what I was going to say, possibly with the exception of the SDI, because that's not really my world. But all of those are extremely good. They would, they'd be all my top points. The slice out, on cloud, we are seeing it. We've just done one of the extremely large sporting events or series of events in the UK, and it was totally cloud-based, and it was just incredible. First time I've seen it at that scale. It's been done totally cloud, and it was impressive. And we see more and more of our customers who are large, pay TV and broadcasters moving to more cloud. And as Dan also mentioned, it's point number 2, hybrid. And not only are we seeing hybrid in the form of, we do some things, on-prem, some things in the cloud, but we're actually seeing, specifically encoding. We've got some of our customers that are actually encoding some things on-prem and some things in the cloud. And that brings up a whole another range of complexities because the workflow can change depending on what it is, and it doesn't always stay the same. So, a specific channel could sometimes be encoding on-prem, typically when it's a live sporting event, and other times when it's sort of potentially replaying or just encoding a signal that's a lesser thing of a replay of a match or something like that, they'll actually do that in the cloud because it's not as important and can be done more easily in the cloud. So channels tend to switch from one mode to another, which I'm finding very interesting and brings up a whole range of new challenges. Dan's last point of correlation actually just comes into that very, very importantly, because to correlate all that together and make it meaningful is very hard. And like Dan, we're spending a lot of time working on that problem. And then the other point of advertising, sure you know that we're doing some stuff in the advertising working group at the SBA as well. But this is probably one of the biggest challenges at the moment. I think in general, OTT has got a lot better. Like standards, normal streaming, live streaming has got a lot better in the last 3 or 4 years. But now the big sort of broken cog in the wheel is the advertising, particularly server-side ad insertion. And this is actually the thing that is causing the most viewer complaints at the moment, is actually when things are switched to an ad break, that's not always a good experience. And so it needs to be a seamless experience. If you're watching something, you don't want the high quality on the match and then very poor quality on the advertising and many other things go around advertising. So the whole thing needs to be a seamless experience, and that's really, really important. And I think that of all of these things, that's going to be the hardest challenge in the coming 12 to 24 months, because ad insertion in OTT is still very much in its infancy, and it's a little bit like the Wild West.
Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that exhaustive answer. Definitely hybrid cloud, SDI to IP transition, advertising correlation, all exciting aspects of the next 12 to 24 months. Also we see that the OTT delivery is improving, right? One example would be of reports showing, for example, rebuffering rates are on a decreasing trend, right? So we believe that there's a general agreement that going forward, quality is going to drive competition. Quality is going to drive the differentiation, right? The video streaming services being able to deliver the high quality will differentiate themselves. And as part of this differentiation is also, if we were to mention some new up and coming technologies, are HDR and Dolby Vision. So for instance, the video streaming services embracing HDR and Dolby Visions, they're going to be able to set themselves apart potentially, right? Hollywood is already producing titles using HDR and Dolby Vision, right? Stadium tracks are already ready as well. They're shooting in HDR and Dolby Vision. Viewer side is also ready, right? Your latest displays are capable of supporting HDR and Dolby Vision. So, what we're facing as a monitoring industry is to solve the part in the middle, right? So, especially for this type of content, end-to-end monitoring will be critical. HDR is harder to deliver, to compress, while preserving the original artistic content and its original perceptual quality. So, as the current workflows have the challenge of evolving in the next 12 to 24 months to handle HDR and Dolby Vision, the monitoring platforms will have to keep up to help video streaming services, handle HDR content properly and true to the original artistic intent of the creators.
Yeah, and it was interesting because something you had said earlier on about data and monitoring was sort of video subscribers. I've seen some interesting technology come out in the past couple of years. There's a company out there called Wicket Labs, which is doing and analyzing, collecting data about the subscriber themselves, and that can be folded into sort of all this other data around quality and delivery and whatnot to create a more holistic picture of the service. So yeah, I think there's lots of technologies that are sort of going to come into play for this end-to-end monitoring. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I answered a quick question that was more directed to the SVA, which was who is chairing the measurement group right now. But again, just a reminder, if you guys have any questions out there, don't hesitate to put them in. I've got sort of one last question to ask, and it's kind of this, sort of ESPN around the horn kind of thing. But, you know, we'll start with Chris. You know, if you can spend like 60 seconds or so on an answer, that would be great. We'll go through to Brenton. But the question is what is the one piece of advice you would give to a video distributor as they map out their monitoring strategy and implement their monitoring stack?
Yeah, JT, great question.
So Chris, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, I would say, JT, you know, viewer-centric video quality monitoring, it shouldn't be an afterthought, right? It should be central to your workflow strategy and decision-making. Video quality monitoring, period, you know, should be, you know, part of the design of the video workflow, right? It should be integrated with the video workflow, right? So no matter if you're purchasing an encoder, choosing a cloud provider, or how you choose your sources, you need to know what perceptual video quality you're receiving. You need to know how each part of the workflow is impacting it and how your end viewers are receiving and perceiving it.
Great. Dan.
Right, so the OTT streaming space is very exciting. It's moving fast. There's a number of new providers out there delivering live streaming services that weren't even just a couple of years ago. And in these streams going across cloud where they, you know, hadn't before. And with these fast moves, you know, monitoring, as Chris said, shouldn't be an afterthought. And sometimes operators are moving so fast to bring a new service to market, and then they find as they scale to tens of thousands, 100,000s, or 1 million users, you know, they start to feel some pains and that kind of thing. So planning up front their workflows, what key points are in those workflows, if they're going to modify the traffic, being able to see what's going on before and after packaging, and if things are aligned and all working well, and having a strategy for monitoring in advance, and being able to have something for their video operations center that says, hey, things are working well or they're not, and here's exactly what the issue is and where it is, so they know how to fix it quickly, we think is a key part of ensuring quality and as far as the competitive landscape.
Great. Brenton, what's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, well, it's basically is a very similar piece of advice, and that is, yeah, monitor as much as you can and do it early during the, you know, if you're building a platform or building a new release, do all the monitoring before you launch the product. And I'll back this up with a tiny little bit of anecdotal evidence to say we do a couple of very large global sporting events, and those guys take stuff really seriously, and we're actually doing the monitoring for them for the several months they take to build up the platform before the event, and we're actually monitoring throughout that process, helping them weed out all the little problems. What I hear always when I talk to broadcasters of building a platform is like, oh, we're too busy building the platform, we'll do the monitoring after we launch. You can see that the problem with that statement is that it's kind of too late then. You really need to do all of this monitoring before you launch a platform. And that is my real key piece of advice. Build the monitoring, as the other guys have said, build the monitoring in. It's not an afterthought. Build it in. And my thing is, do the monitoring during the platform build, because that's when you're going to weed out all the problems.
That's really interesting. So it's almost like you've got two types of monitoring, and lots of companies will use the second part, which is monitoring a service as it's being delivered to viewers. But you're suggesting, and this is very interesting, is to use monitoring as a way to fine tune and tweak the platform prior to it even being launched. Yeah, that's, you know, that's a very interesting piece of advice. I wonder if a lot of video distributors are doing that before they're launching services, or they're just like, put the pieces together, turn it up, and then monitor basically when it, you know, to find out when it breaks.
Yeah,
well, that's fantastic, guys. Yeah.
I was just going to say, they typically say, oh yeah, once people start complaining after launch, they take the tender one of that. This is a very bad strategy. So that's my big piece of advice.
No, that's fantastic, guys. This has been a wonderful webinar. You know, obviously very informative. And, of course, this will be recorded, so we'll get it up on the SBA website later today, and then we'll start sharing that around so that people who weren't able to attend today can listen in and, hear what you guys are talking about in terms of end-to-end monitoring best practices. With that said, I think we're all finished today, so I want to give, again, a shout out to our panelists and as well as our audience for sticking with us through their morning or afternoon to listen to some really great discussion on a topic that is becoming more and more important to our OTT platforms out there. Until next time, we will soon have our 2020 webinar schedule up on the website, and we hope that people be able to join us for those as well. Again, everybody, take care, have a wonderful rest of your day, and a great holiday season.